Yeah, it's the most Australian sounding place ever, isn't it? Kangaroo Island. Um, it's a beautiful place full of coastlines and places to swim and sand dunes and lots of wildlife. Almost anything that you want to do, you can you can find.
Hello and welcome to One Off Travel Stories. I'm your host, Andrew Tawasterna. Here each episode, I chat with someone about one of their favorite travel stories. That one story they've told countless times to friends and family around the dinner table. My guest on this episode is Mark Eden. Mark is an incredible editorial travel photographer and writer who focuses on lesser explored regions and places, and he aims to capture the daily life and experiences of everyday people in what he calls little stories. He's produced a book, Global Village, with a lot of these stories accompanied by stunning visuals. I also suggest checking out his website, markeden.com.au, and it'll give you a much better idea of what this really means, and he really brings it to life in some stunning images. With that said, today Mark is going to tell us about his trip to Kangaroo Island. Kangaroo Island I hadn't actually heard of, but I believe if you're from Australia or from the region, you probably know it well. Kangaroo Island is an Australian island just off the coast from Adelaide, so sort of on the south side of Australia, in the middle, if you will. A stunning island. I was blown away by some of the pictures and by Mark's description of what he saw while traveling around the island. And of course, he's going to tell us a little bit of those little stories of everyday life that he picked up from people along the way. With that, let's jump into it. Hey, Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, great to have you. Thank you for joining. I like to sort of kick it off and ask where are you, I say dialing in from? I know we're talking virtually, but yeah, where are you dialing in from today?
I'm at home. I'm in Melbourne, Australia.
Lovely. Well, first, very different time zones, so I appreciate you making the time because I'm on the west coast of the US. You're nice to hear that you're home. I end up talking to a lot of people who are on the road, so that's good to hear. I sort of looked at your profile and was excited to talk to you because you have a lot of beautiful photography from around the world. Wanted to ask you because I love to understand, how people get into travel and how it's part of their life. But for you, has photography got you into travel, or did travel get you into photography, or was it something completely different?
I think they were kind of two separate things that came together, to be honest. I think towards the end of high school, I just started playing around with my grandfather's old cameras, and he had all the old darkroom equipment and all that sort of stuff. So he let me set up in his basement, basically, and play around. So I would do that. But never really took it seriously or anything like that. It was just something in the background, and eventually I just played with cameras, on the weekend and stuff. I did graduated high school, got jobs, ended up working in corporate, that sort of thing. Got to about 24 years old, and I was just bored and miserable, to be honest.
Yeah.
To the point where I just had to do something drastic, and going overseas turned out to be that thing. So naturally, I took a camera with me. I lived in London for a couple of years and traveled through parts of Europe and things like that. Took photos as I went, and eventually the two things just sort of merged, and they'll forever be sort of one and the same for me now.
That's great. It's funny. I feel like a lot of the folks that I speak to had this kind of pivotal moment and decided I need to leave, wherever home is and shake things up a bit, and see where that takes them. Sounds like took you back to photography, which is really nice. I noticed on your website, I mean, you've got some really great series of photos, but also what you, I think, if I'm using the term correctly, little stories. So you combining these photos with the stories that I guess they're representing. A couple questions came to mind, like places like Cuba, like have you been choosing your destinations, or are they happening kind of surreptitiously? And then, yeah, how did you get into this idea of sort of the little stories,
Little
combining your
story.
photos with the stories?
Yeah, sure. As for choosing places, I'm a giant nerd, so I watch a lot of documentaries. I read a lot and stuff like that. So there'll be something that kind of sparks an interest in a
Mm-hmm.
place or a group of people. And I tend to just sort of pick at the thread, and I'll go down the rabbit hole of research and stuff like that, wanting to know more and more about it. And if it's something that really grabs me, then I'll book a ticket and go explore it for myself. So there's various sort of little inspirations like that, whether they come from even novels or movies
Right.
or something like that.
Yeah.
Not just necessarily documentaries. Like I'm sure everyone's had this experience where they read a really good book, and the location is a character in itself, um, and the way they describe it and everything just makes you want to experience that for yourself. So that could be one reason, or people practicing this old like dying out way of life, that sort of thing. So I tend to I'm just really curious by nature, so I will want to know more. I'll yeah get inspired by something like that, and I'll just want to know more. And if it's interesting enough, I'll go and want to go and see it for myself. Um, as for these little stories, it's kind of a way of talking about the everyday lives of people in these places. Um, I think I don't think we give enough respect to people who are just going about their ordinary lives um, in a quiet sort of way, like the parents who work two jobs to get put their kids through university or college. If you're American, um, things like that, like people doing small things or just setting examples, caring for their community and things like that. We tend to celebrate people who've done, and rightly so, people who've done these massive things, Nobel Prize winners, etc. But people doing just going about their lives and being quiet inspirations to their kids or their community are really what makes the world turn. Um, and I didn't see anyone talking about those people, so that's kind of what led me to focus on that. And I like to see things from someone else's perspective. We travel by nature and compare where we are to home. Like, oh, this isn't like this at home. Well, we have this instead of that sort of thing. So to try and put yourself into the shoes of the people actually living there, um, and understand different perspectives on the world. So
A lot of great insights there. I want to repeat the location is a character in itself. I I hadn't really thought about it that way. I read a lot, and I've definitely been inspired to travel based on books, podcasts, whatever it may be. And I think that is a fantastic way to describe what the location represents in a story or a piece of history. You could study the Romans for a long time, and that will really change the way you feel and see Rome.
mm,
If you're going to go visit there someday, you'll probably be a lot more excited. I know I've had experiences like that, so I love that. And then on the little stories, I completely agree. I find those stories interesting. I mean, I do this podcast with all sorts of people because I just want to hear all sorts of stories of how they're traveling. And you're right. We don't see enough of it because, well, harder to sell those little stories sometimes, but
Yeah.
those are typically the people you talk to when you are traveling, right? It's
Yeah.
just day to day people, and they tend to be really friendly. And they, I've heard a lot of stories now through the podcast. They tend to be very helpful as well, like people going out of their way, um, just to help and to give you a better experience as a traveler if you're friendly. So, anyway, really great, insightful stuff there. So I just wanted to kind of summarize and add my thoughts as well.
Sure.
Um, with that said, so you you we can sort of head towards the story that you're going to talk through today. As a reminder to everyone, this podcast is sort of about one travel story that stuck with you through the years after it happened. But it's great. So we kind of have that background of you getting out there in the world and merging your photography with your travel over time and developing these little stories. But with that, Mark, I'll hand it over to you. Could you give us a little bit of background about the story you want that we're going to talk through? What year was it? Why were you going there? Where were you going? Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, sure. This story, it's actually back in Australia. So, I late last year I published a book, which is a collection of stories, so-called little stories, and photo stories from different parts of the world, just sort of exploring um, shared humanity and the difficulties that we all share, but also celebrating all our differences that we have. Be it culturally, outlook, all those sort of things. And I was
Mhm.
getting to the point where I had kind of enough to start putting the book together, but I didn't have anything from my own country. And this is a weird thing that Australians do. Like as soon as we graduate high school or university, we have that gap year. We decide anyone who decides to go long term travel is shoot straight off overseas,
Yep.
um, to Asia or Europe or wherever. We don't spend enough time appreciating what we have. We don't we don't tend to explore our own country until we've done everything else. And I'm as guilty of that as anyone. But I wanted to include something about my own country. I want to learn more about my own country. It's a really interesting, diverse kind of place. And I'd always been interested in Aboriginal Australian history and beliefs and cultures, and that's something I really missed learning at school. It just wasn't taught in my day. I think it's a bit better now, but it was really just kind of ignored when I
Hmm.
was at school. Um, so I kind of got this idea to do a story about or related to Aboriginal Australia. So I put a call out through a network that I'm part of, got lots of enthusiastic responses, and it ended up meeting a guy from the Ngarrindjeri tribe, which is based in South Australia, sort of south of Adelaide along the southern coast there.
Okay.
His name was Mark as well, so hopefully this doesn't get too confusing. Um, so I met Mark through that. He also runs a tour company as well, so he teaches his Indigenous knowledge, um, to people and in schools as well. So he takes people to these significant places. But this trip they were going to a place called Kangaroo Island, which is a significant place for them. It is, if anyone knows a map of Australia, Adelaide is kind of on the southern coast in the middle. If you drive a couple of hours south of that, get on a ferry for another hour, go straight south, you are on Kangaroo Island. So it's kind of off the southern coast of Australia, kind of in the middle.
Right.
And it's a really popular tourist spot, but it's also a really significant place for the Nungari people. It's a place. of their it's the location of basically their creation story, which tells of an ancestor who the story kind of goes, to sum it up, he was chasing a giant fish. There's a lot of these sort of mythical, spiritual type stories that have lessons in Aboriginal, or I'm going to call them First Nations, stories
Yeah.
and culture. So the story basically goes, he was chasing a fish down a river, and because he's a mythical kind of being, as he went along, he was bouncing off things and creating cliff formations and landmarks and all that sort of thing. And he eventually ended up on this island where he was looking for his wife. He created certain landmarks and things like that as he went around. Eventually, he walked into the sea and up to what they call Kalawindri, which is loosely, you could think of that as heaven.
Mm.
So the belief is that when people pass away, their spirit follows his path to the island and up to, or to heaven, wherever that may be.
Wow.
So that's the basic belief. So that's why it's such a significant place for these people. So he was Mark and his family. They often take their kids and now their grandkids back there pretty regularly for that connection. So it's very important to them to be connected to where you come from, and just to spend time there.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So they were going on a family trip and invited us along. So um, we went along with them. They took us around to some of the various sort of landmarks and told us the stories that are associated with those. And yeah, over time, we just, as we went, they just sort of talked about sort of his experience and related to growing up in Australia at a time where Aboriginal people were not really not treated very well. You have to say, and how he views things today, as compared to how his kids have experienced things.
And so on was he actually, and maybe hopefully I didn't miss this, was he actually born on the island, or was he born on the mainland and then they go back to the island for this sort of spiritual connection?
Yeah, he's born on the mainland,
Yeah.
and but the island is quite important to them to travel back to regularly.
And had he gone back to the island as well, like through his lifetime as a kid? Like, did his parents go back there as well? Is it sort of a pilgrimage of sorts, I guess, if that's the right term?
Of sorts, but it wasn't that simple. It wasn't easy for him to do. He was part of he'd be probably about mid 60s now.
Hmm.
From about So he was part of what's now called the Stolen Generations, which from about, I think it was about 1910 up until 1970. Um, there was a government policy of removing Aboriginal children from their families, thinking that they could be better integrated into society. Society being, basically white people, um, colonizers. So thinking that they would have a better life, essentially, if they were taken away and given different upbringings. So it went through multiple iterations, but essentially they were trying to assimilate Aboriginal people into mainstream Australia, for want of a better word.
Hmm.
So he was part of that. He actually grew up in a mission. He was taken taken away from his family, and grew up in a mission, and was not allowed to practice his language, or cultural practices. He was educated in a very Western school system.
Right.
So it was only really later on that he kind of was able to reconnect with that, and reconnect with his family. I think he found his parents again eventually. Um, and then he sort of started to go back later on in life.
Wow. Okay. And uh, you had the opportunity then to join him and his family on one of these trips back. Um, that's really well, very interesting opportunity. And just to clarify as well, by this point, had you for your book, which is the Global Village book, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. You were saying so you gotten pictures from all around the world and stories and so on by that point, and this was kind of something to have from your homeland, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly that. And
Gotcha.
hopefully it leads to more explorations because there's a lot of diversity and a lot of different aspects to it, and I really just sort of scratched the surface. But yeah, it was really fascinating. A real honor to be able to join them.
So I sidetracked us a bit, but at the moment you're in the story anyway. You're on the island, and Mark is kind of taking you to these well important places, at least
Hmm.
for their history.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, he was taking us around to the various places, which are, I mean, they're tourist attractions, but they're rock sort of, often there's like a rock formation where you can see, so for example, like a turtle in the rock, and there's a creation story attached to that. And for them, just to be there and kind of have that in the background is kind of enough to keep that connection. Um, so he was really telling his grandkids about these things, and we were fortunate enough to be listening in, and understanding that as well.
How long how long was this trip? How long were you with them? And was there anything that like yeah, was there anything that just stuck with you that jumped out, or was I don't know, new learning quite that was fascinating?
Yeah, it was about 3 days. Over 3 days, we sort of stuck together. We sat down the last night. We had a barbecue on the beach, and sat down and just talked about their experience, and that whole conversation has really stuck with me. So think you would think with Mark's background that like he would be quite bitter and angry. Most people would, but there's not a shred of that. He's sees it as being grateful, um, grateful for the insight it's given him. I guess having all that stuff taken away at such an early age made him more curious about it. So he's then gone back and studied his own culture, um, and he's now what's considered an elder, someone able to pass on that knowledge. Um, so, which he does to his family and his own community, but he also does that as part of his tour company as well. So, which is becoming more and more popular. So, it's very recently, um, First Nations tourism has become more and more popular,
Mm.
um, both with Australians, but also he's getting a lot of international interest as well, which is really good to see. Um, but he attributes that to having that taken away, which kind of sparked an interest in it. And funnily enough, the missionaries that he grew up with that were busy stopping him from practicing that culture were kind of scholars in a way, for some weird sort of contradiction.
Hmm.
Um, so they studied this language that they were taking away and these cultural practices, and they wrote it all down. So all the stuff that was lost was actually recorded. So in a weird way, all these years later, these same missionaries that took all this away are now giving it back. So that was something that was kind of, I don't know, for some reason that always just stuck with me, that that full circle.
There's a bit of a silver lining. When you say, like, was there a moment in time where he kind of expressed this or talked through it a little bit, or is it just kind of was apparent in how he thinks about it and living life today and taking taking this opportunity, if you will, with the tourism?
Yeah, no, he's very open and talking through it. His mission is kind of to share all these things,
Yeah,
to create a greater understanding, because there's still it has become a lot better recently, but there's still a bit of a reckoning that needs to be happened. There's this kind of avoidance, if you like. There's a lot of, well, why should I feel guilty sort of attitude, and his response to that is you shouldn't feel guilty. You're not responsible for anything that happened in the past, but you are responsible for what happens now, and you're responsible for the future. We all are, right? So we are responsible for not perpetuating all the stereotypes and not allowing the same sort of attitudes that led to this treatment to continue.
right,
Um, and that was a really interesting way to look at it, I thought.
right.
Um, I also got the chance to speak to his kids, who are sort of early to mid 20s now.
Yeah.
Um, and just contrasting his experience with theirs, and they went to school, high school. They had a much more, I guess, an easier upbringing, but still had that um, hesitation, like to talk about where they were from, who they are, for fear of sort of ridicule or or worse. Um,
Hmm.
but coming back to this place, kind of, and over time, has had the effect of making them proud of who they are, of like learning about these things, and just changing attitudes, I guess.
Yeah.
Generally, has made them more and more proud of who they are, to the point where they're now part of the family business, the tour business, proudly sort of talking about their history and themselves and their own experience. So they're kind of following in his footsteps, in that way. So he's created a legacy for himself.
Well, that's very nice to hear. At least some positive change, even if it takes a little while. So tell me about Kangaroo Island, because I had never heard of it before. Before speaking with you, I did quickly take a look at some photos, and it looks quite beautiful. I'm sure you captured some interesting pictures while you were there as well. But yeah, just curious how you found it, having traveled to a lot of places as well.
Yeah, it's the most Australian sounding place ever, isn't it? Kangaroo Island.
I guess, yeah,
Um,
that's true.
it's actually a pretty popular tourist spot.
Yeah.
There's a lot of tourism industry there. There's quite a lot to do. There's yeah, it's a place where people go. Like, if you live nearby there, it might be the place where you spent your summer holidays when you were a kid. It's that kind of place. So it's long been a well known tourist destination, but there has there's not really been an acknowledgement that it's an important place um, the native people, as well. So that is just because of Mark and people like him. That is just now starting to become more and more, um, I guess, conscious for people. So, but yeah, it's a beautiful place full of coastlines and, places to swim and sand dunes and, lots of wildlife. Almost anything that you want to do, you can you can find, a place to do it there.
Well, then maybe it's just because I live so far away that I haven't heard of it. But if you're, I take it if you're Australian, it's quite, it's a place that like would be on the radar. Um, how does it? Yeah, I mean, from it sounds like a wonderful place for a photographer, given all of the natural beauty. I know you do a lot of sort of portrait style as well, and I'm sure you would have got some good photos, at least of the family and so on. Um, in that process, yeah, um, we when we were starting the conversation, you were talking about sort of nerding out a little bit and reading, and that's a piece that sort of gets you excited to visit somewhere. Was that the case for Kangaroo Island, and did it sort of scratch that itch? Because the story you told about their beliefs, it's interesting. Like, I feel if I went there, I'd be like, oh, okay, like as you said, like these things were sort of created in that story, in that story of creation, and this is what they mean and why they're there.
Yeah, like you can when you hear the story and you look at those, you go to these landmarks, you can see it. Like it's not, oh yeah, okay, you got to use your imagination, but no,
Yeah.
it is quite obvious, right? Whether you believe in any kind of spirituality or not, um, it is there to see. And like he talks about turtle shapes in a cliff face. Anyone that just is a casual visitor um, is not going to see that. But once he points it out to you, it's there. It's you'll never look at a cliff face the same way. So all these beliefs about these creation stories and being connected to the land, and being created by these same people. So kind of leads to um, this attitude of not owning the land, but you're custodians of the land. And that's where they get the idea of taking what you need to sustain yourself, but nothing more, and looking after the land. And there's actually um, environmental groups now that are consulting First Nations Australians about how to care for these environments, which are, as everywhere, under a lot of stress.
Yeah. Yeah, I should know too. Didn't realize this, but it seems the island's quite big as well. Like
Mm.
it's is a sizable piece of land.
Yeah, I think if you were to drive right across it east to west, it's going to take you about 2 hours. So it's not tiny. It looks tiny compared to the map of Australia, but it's not tiny.
Yeah. Um, so I guess what's on just to sort of transition out of the Kangaroo Island story, what's next for you? Do you have anything on your radar coming up?
I've got lots of things I want to do. um, I've been working on a second book, which is not based in Australia. It's a long term project about Japanese traditional crafts. So
Hmm.
I've been heading to Japan a few times to shoot that, and I've kind of getting to the point where I can now put that together. So the next little while is going to be sort of working on that as another book project. Um, and I've got lots of little ideas and projects that I want to do, which I'm kind of researching and looking into how viable they are, and whether there's anything in there that I can dig through. I'm kind of getting more and more interested in immigration type stories and things like that.
Hmm.
People's experiences in a new place, that kind of thing. So I have a few ideas around that theme that I'm looking into.
Very interesting. On the on your book, the Global Village book, how many places did you end up shooting for that book?
There's 12 stories.
Mm.
Um, there's a couple of repeated countries, if you like. I think there's a couple of stories in India and a couple of stories in Japan, but
Yeah.
there's yeah, so probably about 10 different countries in all,
Wow.
which was over a long period of time. It wasn't like I'm going to make a book and then I'm going to book all these trips and go. It was kind of I had this material which which I wanted to put together to something a bit more sort of cohesive and a message. And I I was watching the news like everybody and getting more and more upset and despondent, and I wanted to put something positive into the world because I felt like we need the reminder that we are actually all human. We are all sort of one people. Every time you look at the news, you see a new war, or you see like a new group of people being prosecuted for I don't know, being themselves. And I just wanted to kind of remind people that we are one race, sort of thing. So that's why I like to look into um, shared humanity and these kinds of issues.
That's great. Well, sort of where we started, there's the everyday life of normal people is quite similar when you get down to it, no matter where you are.
That's the thing. Yeah, I if I can if I can make a story or a piece of work that speak that allows a viewer to think, okay, this person is lives on the other side of the world, looks and sounds completely different to me, but I can see myself in their shoes, then that just kind of sparks this little piece of empathy that I think we could do with a little bit more.
Yeah, it reminds me, I can't remember what the actual study was, but it was basically they had people from, I believe it was the US and Pakistan, uh, write diaries, but to each other and like read each other's diaries, kind of like pen pals.
Mm.
Um, and one takeaway was that their lives, although, they thought they were very different, especially at the time, as this was back a few years during the, I guess, like initial Iraq wars in that time, but their lives were strangely similar, like they just were going to the grocery store, picking up their
Yeah,
kids from school, different religion, but they both,
yeah,
were, a lot of them were spiritual in their own way. So, yeah, it's any way to tell that story and to get people to remember that they're not too different, from someone on the other side of the world is I think helpful. With that, Mark, thank you so much for coming on and telling us about your trip to Kangaroo Island and teaching us a little bit about the First Nation history connected to that place.
oh, thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, have a great rest of your day.
All right, you too. Thank you.
A big thank you to Mark for joining us on the podcast today and telling us his story visiting Kangaroo Island. Again, as I mentioned in the intro, definitely go check out his website and markeden.com.au and his book Global Village. Really brings some of these stories to life with some incredible photography. And as always, if you've got an amazing story to tell, you can find me at oneofftravelstories.com.